for you. And we heard earlier from Lalit Modi, the founder of cricket's Indian Premier League, who built a $1 billion sports brand from scratch. Now here's a sports brand that was already there, but needed a bit of rejuvenating, shall we say. And here's the man that's supposed to do that, Andrea Agnelli, chairman of Juventus Football Club.
Hi, Alex. Hello, everybody.
Oh, nice to sit down at the end of the day. No champagne yet, Andrea.
No.
Champagne for you this season, maybe not yesterday. Sadly, Juventus lost the Coppa Italia, but let's brush over that and say Juventus are Italian champions once again, and that must have been beyond your ambitions this season.
Let's say it was beyond planning. It can't have been beyond ambitions.
You came back to Juventus in May 2010. The Agnelli family has a long and proud tradition with it. Is that what you say, it was beyond expectations because you saw the rebuilding process being a long-term thing?
Yeah, no, but I mean, when we talk about Juventus, I mean, it's a matter of pride, obviously, to represent one of the most successful teams in the world. So Juventus has always existed and has been with my family since 1923, making it the longest-lasting franchise within a family in the history of all sports in the world. Under my family, we've won 29 leagues. So the one before that was in 1905, making 30 leagues in total. So when you talk about Juventus, the overall sports objective, it is and is undoubtedly victory. We did come out of a bad patch of a few years. So when I actually went and took direct responsibility of the team itself, we knew that we had to completely turn around both the team and the company. And so I would say it was beyond planning, but it wasn't beyond ambitions, because the ambitions of the team are to win every single competition it enters.
Now, I'm a sports presenter, so I'm fascinated about the football side of it. I'm aware that we've got a vastly business-minded audience here. So as far as Juventus the brand and Juventus the business are concerned, clearly you had to get the results right too. How did you get those two approaches to match each other?
Well, I'll start, I mean, even though we have a 115 years history, I mean, I'd go back to 2010 when I took direct responsibility over the company. We came out of a sports scandal, which was part of the negative patch we went into. We demanded to some managers to come and manage the company, whom had little football experience. We thought we had chosen the right person also to choose to manage the sports side, but that wasn't the case. So despite reaching a couple of good results, coming back from Serie B to Serie A, and a couple of nice results following the backlash of the tremendous, fantastic team we had in 2006, after that things went wrong. It was difficult to manage. A sports team is also heavily exposed to the to the media world, as you well know. It was difficult to manage. It came back. So what we decided is, like, let's get this back into the family responsibility. I have, you know, there's no secret out of that. I've always loved sports management in general. I have been involved for 3 years in Formula One. I'm involved in golf itself. So I decided to get into it and take direct responsibility. When I got in, it was clear that there were two requirements. One was to actually put the sports in front of the management of the business, and that's why, to the poll you've just had, my answer was actually one. No, it's still about the game. Then, because of the complexity at which we're in, and because we manage, businesses that turn over 200 million and over, there is a very strong interest in also understanding how the business is developed. So to us, the objective is to compete at high level and maintain financial equilibrium.
Juventus, as well as going the entire Serie A championship unbeaten, also did it in a new stadium.
Yes.
The old one, the Stadio dell'Alpi, was world famous. Why build a new one?
Well, the Stadio delle Alpi was launched in 1990, was opened in 1990 for the World Cup we had in Italy, and it was built with old concepts. So even though it was only 20 years old, it had no modern requirements. So actually, since 95, 96, one of the priorities of the company had been to have a new stadium, and this is something that, I mean, it's a priority that belongs to the whole of the industry in Italy. As all of our facilities are old. I mean, San Siro is called La Scala, or the football Scala, if you want a theatrical parallel, but I mean, it's very far away from actually having the services that they're required, and there are no other stadiums. So that was one of the aspects. We started in 95. It took us 10 years. Unfortunately, administration in Italy is not as straightforward as it can be elsewhere. We got all the permits, and then we fell into the scandal. Notwithstanding that, we actually still had the courage in 2008, in the middle of the first financial crisis, to pull the button and have an investment of 130 million to actually build a new stadium. So destroying the Delle Alpi and building this little jewel, because the difference between the Delle Alpi was over 70,000 seats. The Juventus Stadium is only 41,000 seats.
Yeah, that's quite small, isn't it? When you look at the expansion we've seen at Old Trafford, for the Manchester United's football club, and for other stadiums, some seem to be getting bigger because they want more gate receipts to not just rely on TV money.
But if you look at the history of attendance at Juventus Stadium, at Delle Alpi or the Comunale before that, I mean, it's always been an average of about 25 to 30,000 people. Somehow, Juventus has the privilege of filling every single stadium in Italy, but not its own. So the right size would actually 40,000, around 40,000 then with the architects.
That's so surprising that when everyone knows Juventus, it's such a famous club. It's, say, won the Italian Championship more times than any other. Do you think that's just a sign of Italian football in general, or do you think if Juventus do things a different way, you'll get the families, you'll get a more diverse crowd, and those?
No, with this new stadium, we can actually get all that. I mean, this year is the proof. This year we've sold out every single game, apart from 2 against minor teams in the month of February when we had about -10 to -15 degrees. What we do need is a different environment, and the Juventus Stadium is a different environment. If you think you've got nurseries in every single, I mean, just to think about nurseries in every single sector of the stadium. You've got all the facilities, and when you get to the premium seats, you've got from top-class restaurant to finger food. So we've got about 8 different hospitality areas, and the stadium is actually alive 7 days a week, which is the first one in Italy. We've opened last week on Wednesday the Juventus Museum, which covers all our 115 years of history. Prior to that, from October onwards, we simply had the stadium tours open, and we had over 40,000 this year. So this is the way to actually serve the stadium on a 7 days basis.
Yeah, because it's not just about building a new structure, is it? I remember going over there a couple of years ago, actually for CNN's monthly golf show, but had a look at the plans, the model you had in the centre, spoke to some English marketing people you had there. Is it fair to say that you have sort of envious eyes on the English Premier League model, and Juventus are trying to replicate that?
The English Premier League are ahead of us. I mean, if I think about the top British teams, they are ahead in marketing their own brands at home and in foreign markets. And if I think about the Premier League, it's ahead of the Italian Serie A Lega. I wouldn't say I envy them, but I would say they are a model to follow. If you think the roles have reversed, if you think back in the 70s, 80s when Italian football was the model to follow, now it's reversed because you actually tackle the problem and move forward.
And if you take it one step further, do you think Juventus might now be the model that other Italian clubs want to follow? Because there is this concern, isn't it, when you have the very hardcore groups of supporters in some stadiums, it makes other fans scared of going to these grounds, it affects the attendances. Does there need to be a bit of a revolution with the Italian approach?
I need a revolution. I think one of the main problems we have alongside others is actually passing a law that will actually incentivize people to build new stadiums. I think hardcore fans are part of the game. When we actually opened the stadium on the 8th of September, I was talking about an urban requalification. If you go in a city and you go in the city center, it's difficult to litter. As soon as you get out on the outskirts, so this is something, it's a natural behavior you see in human beings. So it was requalifying, like it's the requalification of an urban area. That's the way I called it. And we saw it this year. I mean, nothing happened. We had very little accidents. When someone tried to misbehave because of all the modern technology and cameras, he was actually caught and sentenced the following day. It's a matter of bringing the people and giving them the right environment. So to make sure they don't, they behave properly, you have to give them the proper environment.
You're trying to diversify your revenue streams. The new stadium is part of that. It means you can have events and conferences on there on days when there are not matches taking place. There's a brand new shopping mall nearby, isn't there? Your posted loss on your accounts last June was 95 million euros. Clearly you can turn around the form of the team in one season, as Mr. Conte has shown, but in terms of long-term profitability, how long is it going to take to turn that around?
Well, last year, obviously, I mean, the difficult aspects and the difficult decisions have been made, and that's why I was calling about turning around the sports sector. What the major costs for a sports team, for a football team, are players' salaries and amortization of the investments to make them. Once you get those, because of the laws, because of the regulations in which we operate, we are somehow forced to have multi-year contracts. That means, once a player reaches a top team, it is difficult to actually release him. So bad choices in the previous years meant that we were stuck with a series of players that actually didn't perform any longer, end of career, various injuries, etc. So that means a lot of that was stuck into that balance sheet there. And we knew, and we were quite aware of this. In order to actually get some of the players taking off, we had to, pay them incentive money to leave. And that was the balance sheet that when I analyzed the situation in May 2010, I knew I was going to get into that. We're gonna post a significant loss this year as well, though it's going to be far from that one. And that was part of the industrial plan that we have approved at board level last July. And following that, if everything goes according to plan, we should start to get back into an equilibrium with the 12-13 results. That should bring us back on track. It should bring us back on track in terms of the investments we made. We have lowered the average age of the players. We've got better quality. Returning to victory is part of it, because that will boost all the commercial and the sponsorship. That will boost the media rights. And one aspect that we have to learn, that we have to start, and we have a lot to grow, is consumer engagement, in which over here again the British teams are pretty much ahead of us. If you think just of Man U and all the revenues they generate with the sale of media content abroad, with no visibility at the stadium, a significant portion of the turnover comes from that.
Well, that's really interesting, and I'll probably come back to that. But first, I wanted to say a result of winning Italy's Serie A is you're back in the Champions League. I've just spent the last 5 days repeating hour after hour on live television how much it's worth, around $1 billion in prize money overall. Clearly a successful club can get tens of millions of euros. That's a pretty significant dent in any debt, isn't it?
No, surely. And that's
a new TV deal as well for next season.
Yeah, but that's another aspect that needs to be addressed, because it is, I mean, if you're turning over, let's say, we've turned over about 150 million last year. This year will grow without the Champions League to approximately 200. Next year, with the Champions League and the boost we had from victory, we should go up to 250. If you look at the table of the teams that turn over the most amount, last year we had Schalke 04, because they actually went to the semi-finals of the Champions League, which is a great thing if you actually participate. Now, one of the things. So
do you think smaller teams with lesser budgets can still be competitive?
Yes, but one of the things, one of the biggest problems I was saying we have to actually tackle is stabilizing both the revenues and the costs. I think the Champions League is fascinating, and I think ultimately, as the dream by being an owner and a manager within a team is actually lifting that nice shaped cup. That's where ultimately you want to get to.
You and Roman, but he's already got one.
Exactly. Well, I have two coming from the past. I have pictures of myself with it. So,
exactly.
I was there before, and I want to get back.
96, wasn't it?
96, exactly. But I mean, it's the stability of the revenues. Because if you think you get to the last game of the season and you're between second and third place, and you miss a penalty and you miss the entry to the Champions League, that means you're actually cutting off 15-20% of your revenues of the following year. But you're stuck with the players. So somehow, somewhere, you have to find a way of stabilizing that, so that you can actually forecast your revenues for the years to come. As it stands right now, I think the most logical way of evaluating the balance sheet of a football team, which is not the way it's done in other courses of business, is to give the teams a 3 to 5 year span, have a sum total of the revenues you are expected to make, forecast that 1 out of 5 years you're not going to participate in the Champions League, and which year is very difficult. So that's why I'm saying I need a bit more time. And if you actually strike the sum total of all these, the costs and the revenues, you've actually followed a plan. But otherwise, it's difficult year on year.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier you touched on the Calciopoli scandal and Juventus being stripped of 2 Serie A titles, demoted to the second division of Italian football. I know it's complicated and we've got limited time, but you're exploring avenues to still retrospectively get that decision reversed, hence referring to the 30th Italian Championship when some of the media are reporting it's only 28. Because
biased media.
Yeah, how do they do it? You're looking at Juventus, the brand, with this discussions about reviving it. Do you think by pursuing these angles, clearly, your family is steeped in Juventus history, you still feel angry about it, we can all understand why you'd want to pursue it. Is it not better to let the past be the past?
No, if you're the only one who's paid for it. I don't think so. I think it's been pretty clear. We've been prosecuted for some alleged misbehaviors of the previous managers. We were demoted and we were stripped of 2 titles. We've actually followed and respected the sports justice until new elements came out. So where this whole thing started was back again in May 2010, where we said, well, new elements have come out. So we asked the federation to revisit the actual decision they made to assign the title that we've won on the pitch to Inter Milan. And said, with everything that has come out, I think that decision was wrong. Then I think we have two trials at the ordinary justice that are still on their way. Until those follow the due course, I think it is difficult to say if you can go back and have a revision of the sports trial that we had in 2006. But one of the elements that we're really keen on is that there must be an equality of treatment for everybody. If we don't have that, it is very difficult to forget that. Just bypassing that by saying, you know, the period has gone, so that they can't be prosecuted any longer because 5 years have gone by, for us is very important. And we do have this feeling that we won on the pitch. There were a series of behaviors that were taking part in the system, and being the only one who paid for that, we don't think is fair. So, I mean, it's not so much is it important were you all wrong or were you all right. The important thing for us is that everybody's treated the same way. Yeah,
fairness across the board. And completely separately from that, there are other sort of match-fixing investigations, not just in Italy, but in other leagues in Europe. We've seen some very high-profile prosecutions for spot-fixing in cricket. There's never been any suggestion of it, but just watching the Champions League and seeing some of Chelsea's remarkable results, you think, just what if someone out there said, you know, can we believe what we're seeing? Clearly, there's never been any sort of suspicions about that. But is that a concern for you as an owner of a football club, that the authorities stay on top of that aspect of it, so we all believe that what we're seeing on the football pitch is real? Because that would have a major impact on the business side of it.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far as Champions League or when you talk about the top leagues, because at that level, I mean, all the players, you know, receive fairly important wages. It's not that. But when you think about how the betting industry has evolved, the online industry, when you think that scandals are actually arranged from the Far East and they involved second or third division games, that is where there is a lot of concern. FIFA, UEFA, all the federations have been remarking that the betting issue as the #1 problem and priority to tackle in professional football, but I would add professional sports. It is a priority. It is very difficult. I don't think it affects so much when you get the top levels, because at that level you haven't got all the problems that, you know, affect third division professional sports, where, you know, the actual businesses managed are, you know, the turnover is around 1 to 2 million, wages not necessarily are paid regularly, but the people still have families and still have kids.
So that makes it important to keep that revenue going down to the lower leagues, so that...
Or ensuring that you have a right amount of professional teams. I mean, in England, you have a fixed number, you're on about 80. In Spain, you have about 60 teams. In Italy, where a lot of the scandals are, we have 128 teams.
Too many teams.
If you look at the tables of the Lega Pro, so the third division, you have about it's divided into 2. In every single table, you have about 5 or 6 teams with little asterisks marking -6, -4, -3 points because they haven't paid their wages, because they haven't paid taxes, etc. So at that level, when you have 128, and you can only bet on professional sport because you can't bet on amateur sports, that is an element that might have to be reconsidered in Italy, but it should be reconsidered in general. I mean, given the size of the sports, I mean, where are successful sports? You look at the American system, closed, NBA, NFL, NHL, the closed systems. So the franchise is actually growing in capital value together as in P&L value, because no matter where you don't get relegated, you still have access to the market pool, whether it's the Champions League, whether it's the Premier League, whether it's the broadcasting money. When you think you're having a turnover, you know, people getting to the Champions League or people being relegated in Italy or say in Premiership into the first division, that means that 5 to 6 teams per year will completely change the face of the P&L. So if they haven't got stable and strong shareholders and they're back, it means they face very difficult times.
Andrea, let's wrap it up by looking at football in general, of which Italian football is a huge part, and certainly Juventus is one of the best-known clubs in the world. When you look at economic reports on the business of football globally, it's amazing that in these times of global recession, football is still earning huge revenues and increasing them, while at the same time certain clubs have big losses. Overall, though, are you still confident about football's ability to buck the trend of economic gloom and doom? And clearly, you're confident about Juventus's prospects.
Yes, I think top-level sport will stay there. Seeing the growth that we had in the last 15 years, I mean, I wouldn't go and compare just the last two, but since the entrance of pay TV, I mean, that's where we had the big step. It's difficult to forecast that in the next 15 years we're going to have the same growth that we had in the past 15 years. But I think the interest that you have is very strong. So I think the business is going to be stable and it's going to reasonably grow, not as much as before. We are, though, facing difficult times, so we must be responsible in the way that we actually invest the revenues that we get. And from that side, I think the market will see a depression. I don't think we're going to see the transfer that we used to be seeing at 50, 40, 60 million. There's going to be an adjustment of the industry itself. But I think the overall value will be there because you are a fan, I am a fan, we are fans. We'll follow it, we'll watch TV, we'll go to the match. All that will stay there because at the end of the day, sport and managing sport is about managing dreams and emotions, and especially in bad times. I mean, it's a good way of trying to find a way of escaping from the problems that you do have when you walk outside these doors and you face in the real world.
And you made Juventus' fans' dreams come true by reclaiming the Italian Football Championship this season.
Exactly.
Andrea Agnelli, Chairman of Juventus Football Club, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.